It's crazy when you like run into people so organically. That's energy. It's just so infectious. And I have felt so lucky to like have gotten to know you and to hear your story in like our meditation group, and just to see how even in like yoga, like your mindset can really be so infectious, and just like you resonate with it so easily, of just like, yes, like I needed to hear that today, or like, yes, like I thank you for saying that, because you know what, you're freaking right, and like it's things like that that I feel like is so much needed in this world sometimes, of just like people sharing their like authenticity and like being vulnerable, because it helps us all grow. And so I'm just so happy to be able to share your story on this podcast today, and to just discuss, the things that we usually do in meditation and stuff, with a wider audience.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just happy to be here. And I mean, any opportunity to connect with you because you're one of my favorite people I see that I only get to see once a week. So this is like extra. So I'm excited.
I know, right? Extra. Speaking of like our spiritual journeys, because like I know that's something that we talk sort of a lot about in our group, of just like, the things that cause us suffering, and like how do we shift our mindsets to have more clarity, really and truly, around like who we are as beings, instead of being so caught up in like the stories that we tell ourselves every day about who we are and what we're supposed to do in this world. Like where did that journey sort of begin for you, or was it sort of just something that's unfolded throughout the years of, practicing yoga and like working with children and just working on mindfulness in your own life?
And that's a lot of stories and like a lot of like milestones and just memories that are flooding when you're asking me this question because just to share a story, I was
Mm.
looking out the garage and actually looking for my grandma. She used to write letters and she had the most beautiful handwriting. I just wanted to find something on my grandma like last month and just really present to like remembering where I come from. And I remember coming up, finding a box of just many random binders and papers. And I remember looking at, and I did a lot of to-do list and action list and journaling through my academic life and like personal life growing up. But I had no idea that I still do the things I've done like 20 years ago when I was like 8 and 12. Like really positive, uplifting, encouraging notes. Like I remember looking at um, a schedule of like all my classes, and on the side was like, "Don't give up. You got this. Remember where you've come from. You got through so much. I mean, what's this? Like, what's this challenge? You know what I mean?" And very like positive. I'm like, "Whoa, I was positive at 10 years old. Like, how did I even know to be that way? You know what I mean?" And like fast forward to now, being I'm 39. I'm like in this season of just diving into doing more spiritual inner work. And as you know, we meditate every week on Tuesdays, and it's such a great, powerful experience to meditate in this group of people on a similar journey, just like a yoga practice, right? Different sort of like um, level of growth and transformation, but within, which is one of the most hardest, if not challenging, things to take on. And it's just when you're like you said, you were pulled to me and pulled to people that you want to get to know. Same with like experiences. I was pulled to like just dive more into who I am. Who am I in this world? Like, what is my purpose? Like, who am I
Mhm.
truly? And this observing myself, like, I'm just, a butterfly on the wall, you know what I mean? And like, see who I am in that circumstance or in that conversation. And I tell people now, man, you are not just your own best friend. You can be, but also you're going to be the most interesting person you know because you are with yourself every millisecond of your living life. And I think that's so fascinating. So for
Yeah.
my whole life, just kind of unraveling. Yeah. Hmm, good question.
Yeah, I mean, the process of unraveling for me has been so intense. I honestly wasn't expecting it to be as intense as it is, because like you say, you spend all this time with yourself. You would think you of all people would know, right, who you are and like what you're supposed to do, but it's like none of us really know like what it is that we're supposed to do. We're kind of just like playing this role almost of like human being on this earth planet, and we're like told all of these stories about who we're supposed to be based on our gender and like cultural expectations, and slowly we kind of like conform to a lot of these like narratives of like what it is to be a person. And one
Mhm.
of the things that's been so tough is like that unraveling process of like, okay, like when you strip off all of those layers of like, okay, I'm a girl, okay, I'm a black girl, okay, I'm a black girl that's also Indian, okay, I'm a black girl that's Indian that's from this island, then who is left behind all of that? Like, who is Harsha without parents? You know, who is she before there was a she? And I feel like that has been such an eye-opening experience because I recognize like when I started to really look within, it was just like this curiosity, you know, this curiosity to experience what it is that life is, just to experience like the sunlight on your skin, to experience, you know, swimming in the ocean, eating good food, laughter, like all of these emotions that we sort of take for granted once we get accustomed to them. And it's just been like so intense, really and truly, just to go back to that like light that we all are, and to like not have to have the weight of all of these other roles that we play be the thing that like clouds our judgment or like causes us suffering and anguish, because it's like, oh, like things aren't going the way that I wanted because the little girl in me had like all of these goals because society told her she needed to have these goals, so she believed them, and it just like spirals off and on onto like all of these like just like paths that you take. And it's funny because I remember you mentioned like you know, you're thinking about like which is the path that I take that like I don't die. I so relate to that. It's like, what do I do so I can make it through this with the least amount of suffering, but also living so grounded and rooted in the present. And yeah, it's I don't think I'm like at the root of it yet, but it's just like I don't know, like so far, it's just been incredible to even be able to re-meet yourself again, even though you've been yourself this whole time. It's just like, oh my God, like to go back and reflect and to see that even the kid that was you already knew who you were then, even though like when we age, we are like, who is this person? And you go back and you find notes and you're like, oh my God, like we were always this loving, kind light, and somewhere along the way, it's like we almost forget that and have to be reminded of like, no, you were always this person. Like you were always this just open, beautiful soul that was here to experience. And I don't know, like it's amusing to me sometimes because it's like, oh my God, like you knew all along type of a thing. So like what the hell were you stressing out about? But it's also just like the process of unraveling is
Mhm.
it's a lot.
Yeah, I feel like, a lot of what you said just resonates, just as far as like who we are in this world, as far as labels that make sense for us to fit in this world, but also like how do we fit in this world, knowing those are like labels that we can fit into but don't have to fit into, and also knowing that there's a never ending unraveling happening and we'll never know the end until we're in the ground, right? And so
Mm.
it's about the journey, and like that's the fun part, right? I hear it like I hear the journey in your voice when you explain it, which I feel in my life right now. It's an adventure. Like, whoa, I forgot almost how to have fun in life. Like, oh my gosh, living life is an adventure, right? Because we get caught up in the have tos, need to, should haves, and expectations of others that I mean, I've lose sight many times. And I think the cool thing about that in your like just listening to you like share, I was like, man, like if we could just forget about what's happened in the past just for this second, like who in this moment would we be? Like, who would we be? Like, if there's nothing in our space right now, completely just a
Mm.
blank space. And that's where there's a practice, right? That all the stories we've made up, all the like for me, a lot of about my brain makes me who I am, right? Who we are is what our brain thinks. And what the cool thing is that I found through like meditation was how we met is that like we are not our brain. Like we're not this organic body, and we are, and there's a power we have within us that is untapped to the fullest potential that allows us to be um, able to be powerfully choosing who we get to be, which is like whoa, right? And then we forget, then we remember, then we forget, then we remember, right? It's like, okay, but the cool thing is, like, during this spiritual inner work journey, right, there's like a dying and growing and just pruning of those neural pathways that don't serve us anymore. And like that's that's the adventure, right? The Indiana Jones adventure. Woo! Like giddy up, let's go. Like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be also like scary, and I'm gonna sweat a bit, and oh my gosh, I'm gonna like want to like knock it up, and it's gonna be okay because I know like you are similar, a human being who goes through these emotions to go through these life paths, and that's what like keeps us connected to.
Hmm.
I love that I've had this opportunity to share my story because hearing your story, I was like, hey, yeah, I've been in similar situations where I had to move and like learn how to be a certain way. And I'm like this brown woman and I'm a woman, but also like, do I identify as that? And like, does it matter? And all this stuff, right? And so, yeah, it's stronger together isn't just a hashtag.
Facts. That's why I like love the saying that like with Ram Dass of like we're all just walking each other home because it's like
Oh,
that is literally what we are doing. Like we're
yeah.
all in this sort of like okay, we popped into existence and we're kind of just like okay, now what, you know? And it's just like we're all kind of like okay, you're here, you see me, right? Like you see we're here, right? You're seeing what I'm seeing. Okay, cool. What is this? Can do you understand what's going on? Oh no, okay, great. At least we both are confused and lost, and you know what? At least we're not in it alone. We can have fun. We can joke around as we try to figure out what this thing is that we call consciousness. But you're right. It's like when you recognize that we're more than what our brain tells us we are, and the thoughts that we have are just like reflections of this space that we operate in.
Mm,
Like for me, that has been just like the biggest mind-blowing realization of like the thoughts that I have are only the thoughts that I have because of the experiences that I've had, the things that I've come into contact with. And if you take all of that away, what would I think about? You know, what would I be if I couldn't think about those things? And like you said, like if you forgot your past, what then would you be? Just a blank canvas? And you're right, like there's like this cycle of like constant rebirths and deaths that we go through in every moment of like we're always changing who we are based on the context of the environment, which to me has also been another big shift of like this like interdependence of like who we are with our environment that results in this expression in that moment that only occurred in that moment because of the condition of the environment. And the minute you change the environment, the way that you would respond to it would be entirely different. And it's just so opposite to this like very individualistic, like you don't need the world is just there and we move through it and it's, you know, ours to dominate. Like it's just it's a very different way of looking at things, but I find it way more peaceful when I look at it as sort of this inter exchange between the condition of the environment and how I then perceive it, as opposed to it being like all on me, like me as an individual, and I have to figure it all out by myself because if I don't, then I'm the failure, you know, and then all of this other tra la
mhm.
la then shows up as a result of that, which
Tra la la. And we all have that tra la la, and I think, I mean, gosh, you say so many good things I want to touch on. I think one of them is like the stories you make, right? The lenses we have. And it's I'm a big, huge Brené Brown fan.
hmm,
And there's a book she wrote about around shame, right?
hmm,
And so, growing up in I'm a Filipino American first generation, and my parents, sacrificed a lot and struggled and suffered, and were able to raise my brother and I in an environment where we had more opportunities than they have, for sure, right? A sense of entitlement, for sure, right?
hmm,
And there are moments where like there's a guilt and shame of like, well, I should be grateful. Like, why do I feel bad, or why do I feel guilty, or why do I feel shame? And I think it's being present to like, okay, oh, there's that tra la la happening right now, and that's how I see the world. Then how
hmm,
people speak to me is how that lens will shape my perspective. And it's like so trappy, as we know when we meditate. Like, oh, there's that voice doing that thing again around shame. Hey, you. And I realized that I used to just be so attached to that, like I just depended on that emotion for me to make sense of the world and to make sense of other people, my relationships, and in relationship with myself. But I didn't realize how much power I was giving away to that story, that I really didn't know who I was. And so when I meditated and was present to like clearly discerning what that is not me, I was like, man, you can't forget it. You know what I mean? You can't go back and reverse to you who you were before, which is the cool part. Nothing to write down, which I like to write down notes and like journal and observe and like reflect. And there's like nothing to be done there. Have you had that similar experience where like, whoa, there's a really strong story that comes up? Yeah.
Yeah, all the time. Like that's been my biggest thing to be mindful of are those stories that I have been telling myself my whole life about who I have to be and why I have to achieve what I have to achieve. And it's funny because as I've been I've been doing coaching this year. That's one of my gifts to myself as part of like doing that inner work cuz I realize like we all need support, and as much as like I say I want to cultivate this like inner human within me, I know I can't do it alone cuz like I can't see my own biases. Like I can't see the things that I have been hiding from myself for all of these years because I've been hiding it. Like and I'm doing a very good job at hiding it from my own self, that like
Mm-hmm.
obviously I can't see it. And my life coach, she has really been helping me get to that root of like the stories that cause me pain, you know, in my life, that as a result of that pain I built all of these external stories and personas to sort of guard against that, to protect against that, to defend the fort and make sure that Harsha is safe and secure. And going through and like revisiting those things and having to do breath work to breathe through it, it released a lot of emotion in me of like, oh my gosh, like it was that moment. Like, and it's crazy because it's like things that happened so long ago that you're kind of like, oh yeah, like it happened, whatever. But you remember it. Like, and there's like your, that, like the body remembers kind
Mm-hmm.
of a deal of like all of those emotions that like cause these stories to spin off that I have been recycling over and over and over in my head were grounded in a very specific moment that my body remembers. And when I finally like gave myself the space to face it, all I had was like of course there was anger at first. Like it was just like a bunch of rage of like, oh my god, like I'm so angry that this happened and like blah blah blah. And then once the anger sort of dissipates, then there's the sadness of like, oh my god, like there was this whole part of me that I straight up neglected and was like, I don't want to deal with you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
putting you in the corner. You stay there because I really don't want to deal with you at all. You're making me weak. I don't like feeling this sadness. So I'm just going to ignore you. And after I sort of released all of that sadness, then there was this like unconditional love of just like, oh my gosh, like I love you. Like I am so sorry that I ever neglected you, that I ever treated you this way. And it's like, you know, Tang has this, you know, the example of the crying baby and like just soothing the crying baby. And it's like being sort of that like feminine mother figure to the parts of myself that were spinning these narratives that resulted in these like personas that were built to really defend against that.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like very very cathartic, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time it was very just like grounding of like, oh my gosh, like look at all of this that you had built. Like you built this entire storm because you got hurt. And just to be like, I'm so sorry, you know, that like I didn't have the language, I didn't have the tools to support you then, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm here for you now. And I love you in all of your pain, in all of your chaos, in all of the mess. I still love you. And you've always been worthy of that love. And that to me has been so, so beautiful. And just even this last month of being able to recognize that, and like, for me, it's really been a lot of crying because, like, I feel like that's usually how it ends up, is like me just bawling my eyes out of like, oh my gosh, like But really, it's like that love of self to nurture the crying baby and to hold it and to love it and to let it get the attention that it's always wanted, but I refuse to give it.
Mm,
And then it kind of just results in this like peace of like, okay, like now we can really let it go, like really and truly let it go. And you feel that relief of like, whew, like, okay, finally, like I don't have to carry that weight with me anymore. Like, wow, like we were carrying that this whole time. Like, oh my
mm,
gosh. And it just like, I don't know, results in this really like bursting of love for myself of like, I'm so proud of you, you know, for doing that work, even though it's scary and you know, for the longest while did not want to do it.
mm,
But to now come to this place where I don't have to feel ashamed. I don't have to feel like there's any part of me that needs to be repressed. It's
mm,
like very empowering at the end of the day of like, oh my gosh, like I can walk whole and
mm,
not care how I'm showing up because it's me. Like it's just me in the moment being me. And no matter what that is, if it's crazy and chaotic or ground or very like aggressive and just like driven, like it's all me and it's beautiful and I love her and I wouldn't wish to be anything else, you know? And so, yeah, but it's been tough because it's like facing all of that.
mm,
It's intense. Like it's
mhm,
been really intense of just like,
mhm.
wow, like, wow, 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 wow. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, clapping for you for just like, just celebrating you as finding that part of you, rediscovering that part of you, also acknowledging that part of you
Mm,
is courageous. Because I used to work in assisted living, and there's many people I remember who don't acknowledge that part of themselves that are broken and that is imperfect and imperfect in the same manner. And that's a part of the beautiful journey, is like once you're on it, you can't go back. You cannot. There's no
mm,
way. And so and it reminds me of a part of my life that is similar of when I had a life coach, many, and one of them was, she was the first woman coach I've had. And I knew already that like, oh, this is going to be a challenging coach. First of all, she's a strong, intimidating, bold woman. And I just had this history of like having like the resentment, or like even this like don't tell me what to do from like a woman, because I've been bullied by girls when I was younger.
mm,
And I remember how she was the most impactful coach I've had. And because I love coaches, and we can't do like life alone for sure. And we have to have someone who sees life outside ourselves to know where we can work on, where we're like weak on, where we can grow in, right? And so she said to me, because I was really hard on myself. I was at work, and I was a personal trainer at the time. And I was just hard on myself for not giving my client the results they wanted. And they are sad and upset. And I was like, I failed. Well, I'm not meant to do this. Well, there's more proof of like, I'm not worthy. I'm not smart enough. Whatever that story was around shame.
mm,
And she said, Melissa, and she was very straight. She had her own business. She was a go getter. She was just the right coach in that season. And she said, I want you to close your eyes. I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to relax and close my eyes. And she said, I want you to picture yourself as a 4-year-old child. Like, what were you doing? What were you wearing? Like, how did you feel like? And I remember myself as a 4-year-old child. I used to wear a lot of dresses because my mom would dress me in a lot of dresses. I had a little boyish haircut. She used to cut my hair all the time because a Filipino tradition and superstition was that if you had long hair, you're going to be short as a kid. So you got to cut your hair really short, as like a boyish short, relative, not relative, but at the time in the 80s. And I remember I always had bread in my hand, and in my culture it's called pandesal. It's like this sweet bread. And I always had bread in every picture in like the photo album. There's bread in my hand, and a phone. Those two things. And I was like happy and like running around, don't care whether there's mud on my shoe. And I told my coach, "Oh, I'm happy. I have bread in my hand. I'm running around in a skirt getting dirty and muddy." And I remember her saying to me, because I was really upset with myself and just like just being very, put myself down, right?
mm,
And she said, Melissa, so there's that girl. Would you say what you're saying to yourself right now to that 4-year-old girl? And I'm like, no, I wouldn't. And I cried. because she really represents me to that moment where if that child literally went back in time, was this 4 year old pure 4 year old heart, I talked to that little girl the way I was talking to myself. Like I'd never do that. And she said, I want you to put a picture of yourself on your phone of that 4 year old girl. And so to this day, I still have that on my phone. Like I haven't changed it. And so, and it made me realize of like how strong I am, how like the gifts I have that God's given me, and like, wow, there's no one else like me. So I am perfect as the as I am like done to my genome and my DNA of being Melissa Lavro Barasona. Just like you are, because you are a unique individual, no one else like you. So that was
Mm.
like what I was really present to you through your story, and present to how every moment we can recognize that and like be like refreshed and transformed again. Super cool.
Exactly. Like I often like when I was trying to figure out because like in college I kind of noticed halfway through I was like something is off here. Like I wasn't depressed or anything like that, but I could tell like I had a level of anxiety that I had never really felt prior in my life. And I was really kind of like low like cuz growing up on the island I was used to being the it kid, like the kid that always had her shit together, like people would always like really put me on a pedestal that I'd never even asked to be on. And that put a lot of pressure on me just regarding of like you said being really hard on yourself. Like I can relate to that 100%. Like I am so hard on myself that like I don't take failure easily and I would rather like I noticed that there was this tendency of I rather avoid going down a path that I could tell could potentially lead to failure because I was not used to being forced to fail and as a result like it caused a lot of anxiety in me because I could not deal with struggling like this. Like it was just like really foreign to me to not being number 1 in my class, to like get a grade that was like below average. Like I was like what is this? Like what is this feeling? And I remember like just like I would always go back to, yeah, but who is the kid that
Mhm.
wanted this dream? Like what did she want? Like who was the kid that before I cared about grades, before I cared about being the smart kid, like what was it that she wanted? You know, like why did she enjoy school in the first place? And I realized it goes back to like I was just curious. Like I literally was just curious about the world and everything in it. And I loved learning about it because I was like, oh my God, like I'm in this world that has all of this cool stuff. Like I just want to understand it. Like I just want to be a part of it. I want to appreciate it. And it changed to this thing of like, a kid that just wanted to learn because she loved the world to, oh well you have to get good grades because you need to get into this top school because if you don't get into this top school then you're going to be a failure and obviously we can't have that because your parents are immigrants and like they work so hard and they sacrifice all this stuff for you to be in this country and now you're not getting good grades. Like what the hell, like what's wrong with you? Like I thought you were better than this, like you were that kid, remember? Like what and then it just like you like where do you go from there, you know? And it's just like really not, it was not a healthy place. And I could tell that I was like I was like Harsha, if you continue like this is you're not, there's no way you're going to survive this. And not to say that like I was suicidal or anything, I just knew that I would not have the energy to maintain that kind of like lifestyle. I just knew
Yeah.
it. And I knew that deep down I wanted to be here. Like I knew I wanted to learn all of this stuff. I wanted to understand engineering because like I still that curious kid,
Hmm.
but I needed to change the way that I was going about it because if I continued on this path of doing it the way that other people wanted me to, it was never going to work for me. It just simply wasn't. And I feel like that was the best decision I could have ever made for myself of like realizing that you are not doing this for anybody other than that curious kid that just wanted to learn about the world. And if you
Hmm.
weren't doing it for her, then what is the point? Like if you're not living out her dreams, her passions, like her just thirst for this life, then you're on the wrong path, you know? And I realized like I was like, no, like I actually do want to learn this because I always wanted to learn this, but I had to stop being like letting all of these like external narratives of who I had to be, of being that kid that always got straight A's, of being like the perfect good girl. Cause I'm like in Asian culture, there is that like strong gender stereotype of girls have to be a certain way. You have to be proper, you have to act good, you have to behave, you can't be too much. You know what I mean? Because what will people say? You know, like that's usually the saying. Like, what will people say? What will people think if they found out? And I had to get to a point where I was like, fuck it. I don't care. I really and truly do not give a damn what they think. I don't care what they say. That's their problem, not mine. And I'm like not gonna live my life worrying all the time about what other people are gonna think about my life decisions. That's their problem. This is my life, right? At the end of the day. And I remember, like, for me, a lot of that was tied to my dad's approval. Like, I one of the things that was, like, really difficult for me was thinking that I would disappoint my father, because like, he has always been I wouldn't say, like, he was tough on me, but he's definitely, like, the patriarchal figure, in my family, and so, for me, it was just, like, if I disappointed him, it would destroy that little girl because all she ever did was love her father, you know what I mean? And wanted to make him proud. And I remember telling him, like, Dad, like, what if I don't do this? Like, what if I don't succeed? Like, would you still be proud of me? Like, would you still love me? And he was like, Of course. He's
Mm,
like, Of course. He was like, At the end of the day, I just want you to be happy, like, no matter what it is. And I was like, Oh my gosh, like, thank you. Like, thank you for just saying that because that little girl needed to hear that because all this time she was thinking like, "Oh no, like I have to do it this way because if I don't then I'm disappointing the man that I love the most."
mm,
And I like could not do that. Like even now like I can feel that heartstring of like if I disappointed him, it would hurt me.
mm,
um and just being able to be honest with him of like, hey, like I'm having a hard time with this, and I need to know that at the end of the day you're always gonna have my back. And he was like, of course, like why would you
mm,
ever even doubt that for a second? But it's crazy because like that voice in our head like makes it so much worse than it is. But then when you have like the bravery of being vulnerable, because that was even tough, just to even ask him that like was so tough for me. And to know that it was okay, I was like, again, relief of
mhm,
like, whew, okay, well, we don't have to carry this burden anymore. Like, it's gonna be okay. And as long as my parents were fine with me, I really could care less what the world thinks. I'm like, the people that birthed me are cools, we're cools, and I'm curious for you, like, how it's been sort of like also navigating that like journey of figuring out kind of like acknowledging our worth and it not being tied to a specific goal. Because I know like in Asian cultures especially, it can be really tough for girls to figure out what their purpose is, because I
mm,
feel like in our culture a lot of the time it's like women's only goal is to be subservient to men, or like to be a wife, or like to be a mother. And I feel like there's so much more to who we are as women, than just being a role for somebody else, and
mm,
like to actually be empowered, like in our divine femininity, to take up space and to be nurturers of more than just within like our families.
mhm. It's our parents are the first people in our life who make the biggest impact on who
Hmm.
we show up in the world. And I have very strong connections with both my parents, and I know my relationships with my mom and my dad show up in the relationships with the men and women in my life, and with myself and how I show up. I grew up very tomboyish growing up. I love my parents, and we've been through a lot. There are times we didn't get along. I used to label myself as like the rainbow sheep. Like, do I belong to this family? Why am I so different? Like, I'm just so out there. They're like totally like just academia, super smart. Like, I can't fall off that far from the tree. You know what I mean? And I realized that, like, for me, my faith is very important to me. I'm Christian, and like who I see myself is someone who was made perfectly in His image, and I'm defined by my faith, and I'm like, he doesn't make a mistake. Like, I am who I am, and can forgive myself and redeem myself through my faith and know that like my parents love me. They did the best they can. They were raised a certain way. I was raised very strict, very firm, and I love my parents, like love my father, and I know like it through the like, generationally, I um am present to this day how certain things in how I was raised have formed me to make um, have shame be a huge part of my story and how my personality has developed. And so a lot of my last couple of years, especially last year, has been about healing that part of my inner child. And like I'm single and I'm happy. I'm like the happiest I've ever been right now because I'm actually taking care of not just myself, but getting to know my family better, deeper, and also getting to know who I am and healing those parts that I sort of like right going through the deep, dark, parts where I don't want to like, get into the muck, but like you gotta go through the muck. Like we say in yoga, the lotus flower has to be in the muck to grow. It has to go through the crap and the dirt and the muck and the challenge and the sweat and the tears and the suffering to like that's where life is in the suffering, like being able to experience that, as a human being, to learn from it, to grow from it, to heal from it is like that's for me the value of my life. And I go on a tangent sometimes, and you can like understand my neurodivergent brain of ADHD and anxiety and depression is all intertwined like this vicious cycle. And like I've embraced who I am in that manner, because it's made me like really feel the world in a way that some people don't know how to. And there's like a lot of gifts that people have that I don't have, but we all have a gift. And for me, it's like I love people. I feel deeply for people, which is why now my parents, my dad is an engineer and they're both retired. My mom's a nurse, retired, but they were in their professions for over 40 years. And so for me, I dabble in a lot of different things. Like I'm a teacher, I'm an educator. I love health and fitness. I love, being with young, old, whatever age you are. I'm here to like just share my experience and wisdom, and like God's using me, and um I think I'm just enjoying the journey right now. And I'm also knowing that this is a definitely a more fun journey shared with other people who are like-minded. Like I'm close to people who are share similar faiths or even different faiths to challenge my faith and to grow with people and to accept people for who they are, because we're really more the same than different. And like be behind this skin, these eyeballs, like this physical organic um piece of matter is this bright energy of light that we all are. And there'll be time where it starts to dim, and then we'll be off this earth. So it's like, you know what I mean? And it's like that's the color, even but acknowledging, we all have a history. We all have like generational stuff that follows us. And so I think that's why this like a podcast that you do sharing stories and experience is so important. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like conversation is a great way to really get to better understand ourselves, because it's like, especially like in the meditation group, when like you share, especially like it can give me so much more perspective on like how other people think about the experience of life that we all share. And in it, like it gives you even more space to look at your own experience and be like, you know what, exactly, like that is exactly the thing that I have also been struggling with. Like, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. Or like when you hear like other people's journeys in their own meditation, you're like, yep, I've been there too, sis. I feel you on that one. The numb leg is a pain in the ass, but we all get through it. Or like having the racing thoughts and being like, then will this ever end? And realizing, well, your problem is not the thoughts. Your problem is you identify with said thoughts, and then it's like, oh my gosh, light bulb. And then you just keep going through that. And when you, I feel like, have conversation, and especially you're able to really be vulnerable with yourself, because sometimes, like when you're in a group, it can be hard to open up and share the things that are happening in your experience, because the whole thing of being vulnerable can be really tough because it comes back to the shame and like judgment and like what will people think, and you have to like overcome all of these other delusions that stop you from just like speaking your truth, and no
Mm.
matter whatever it is that it shows up as in the moment. And when you do it, you recognize like, oh well, for one, it wasn't that bad, you know what I mean? And two, like, doesn't that feel good to be able to share and like hear what other people think and to get feedback and clarity that helps you then grow even more? Because then you're not alone in it. And I feel like that's the one thing that I've benefited so much from just through the practice of having a podcast and being a part of the meditation group is that community is everything, and like you don't have to do it alone. And like I felt like for so long that I had to do it alone, that it was like me, myself, and I. Like I'm an only child, so I was like, yeah, I
Mhm.
have to have my own back because I've had my own back like since I came out the womb, you know? And when I took that like burden off of myself of like, no, Harsha, like you don't need to depend on yourself for everything, like let your community show up for you. Wow. It, like, completely changed, like, just even my own internal suffering of, like, "Oh, I need to figure this out by myself. Oh, I can't ask for help because then that's perceived as weakness." Or, "Oh, I have to keep this to myself because I don't want them to hear this crazy thought that I'm having right now." Like, they don't need to know that. And when you share it and you're like, "You know what? Let your community show up for you." Like, there's a gift in, like, the yoga practice of giving and receiving. That was something I really had to internalize for myself of like, you give so much, why not like give yourself space to receive for once and let that be okay, and not have to worry so much about like, oh, you're too much, like you shouldn't ask for anything, like it should you got it, you don't need help, like you can figure it out on your own. And it's like, no, like you can't do it all by yourself, and there's no need to do it all by yourself. Like that's why we are a consciousness, like there's more of us, like the universe was clearly bored on its lonesome, so it created everything else so we can play. I mean, why would you want to just be alone when you have a huge community that's there to support you and love you if you let it, if you give it, the space to come into your life and support you. And yeah, that has been so great for me to like actually be able to give myself permission to have community and to not have that be a sign of weakness, but actually a strength.
Mhm.
Because there's like, the power in diversity, the power of being a part of. And like for me, that was another thing that really opened my eyes of like, you were never an individual. Like what made you, like I know this world tricked you into thinking you were an individual, babe, but really and truly, even from the day you were born, everything you have has been given to you by your community. The skin you wear, the name you use, the beliefs you have, the identity you walk in were all gifts given to you. So what made you think that any of it was yours to begin with? And when you leave this plane, you'll give it all back, to the very community that gave it to you in the first place. And I feel like that's kind of the beauty of the rebirth and death and reincarnation, and the concept of energy is never created or destroyed. Like it's just shared and transformed. And it kind of takes so much of the burden off of having to figure it all out by yourself,
Mhm.
because you don't need to do that, like you have people around you. But I'm curious, like, how has, yoga or even leading yoga for others, helped you in just like your journey of figuring out your purpose and being a steward for others? Because I feel like being a teacher is such a giving experience to have and is so needed.
Mhm.
And I feel like you really do curate an experience that's
Mhm.
so powerful in helping people heal in so many ways that I feel like as individuals, we sometimes forget how big our impact is because we're only looking through the lens of like who we are.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just curious like how being a teacher, especially in this practice, has sort of helped you, understand that balance of giving and receiving and being, a steward and a vessel for the universe, really.
There's so many things that you said that I just want to like touch on, and it's like we could talk forever. Um, Truth.
I'm a rambler, I really
No,
am.
no, it's what is that word ramble? More of like you're sharing your story. I'm receiving. It's a gift. Like, you know what I mean? It's all good in my hood. You know what I mean? I'm being told that I talk too much and I'm extra and too much and I need to like, all my life. Too much. Like lower it down, Melissa. I'm like, no, thank you. And I respect you, and I know people. There's a sensitivity I have to be aware of with people. I think that's what comes with being someone in my position. Like I have a role as a teacher. Um, that I. It's so funny you asked me this because my mom and dad they have always asked if I wanted to be an engineer or a
Mm,
nurse, and I've tried in nursing, and it wasn't for me only because there's so much pain that someone like myself who's really sensitive to emotion and very empathetic. I just got really depressed, and a lot of mental and emotional health have touched my life, with being depressed and suicidal and anxious and being diagnosed. The world just looks different, and so I approach
mm,
it different. So like when I meet my fellow sisters were like, woo, let's go get it, let's go. And I know sisters were like, let I go, but they're inside like, like, it's like being able to, as a teacher, like being able to meet people where they are is first meeting myself where I am at. And I think, I mean, I think back of when I first was asked to teach. Like, no, I am a follower. Give me the instructions and I can follow it to a T and do it exactly perfect because I am a recovering perfectionist. And it's not a joke because there's no like level of perfectionism. Like it's not possible. But for me, it's a level of like that's how I receive love. And I need love and I need connection. So that's how I show up is like being, overachiever, number three Enneagram. Hello, we out there, not very Christian, but it's like it helps me like know how to act in the world. I also know it's not who I am. So as a teacher, there's a level of compassion. And this past year, I'm just really present to who I am as a teacher. And when I went back to school during the pandemic to get my master's degree to teach in education in public schools, it was a level of empathy and compassion, and also just understanding who I truly am underneath the stories of like I'm not good enough, like I can't do this, like what am I doing? Do like people even trust me in the classroom? Like these are the kids, like oh my gosh, like the level of like influence I can have, and knowing I can trust myself because there's someone like you said in your story of who you are. I would not be here by my own accord. No matter how much I've lived my life being independent and thinking I'm the only one I can trust, uh,
mm,
that can only go so far. And so to this day, like I am who I am because of those around me who have loved me, who have seen the power in me and spoke to that power. I remember my parents, they like I said, they were very strict with me and they believed in me. But sometimes when they would teach, like say that they do believe in me, it would like make me feel like, are you sure? Because I don't know if I'm like smart enough. Like I still had that level of self doubt. I remember when I gone through a level of like just like sinful living, doing like all the things like, dabbling in some drug use and like drinking a lot and just living a life that did not serve me. Like just having multiple partners and just not living a life that served my purpose and my strengths. And for me, I believe like God like was like, no, that is not the life for you. And I got really sick. I remember like levels in our life where we're slowed down. Like you have to slow down. You have to meet yourself where you are because it's going to happen again and again and again. And that's been sort of like the lesson in my life is do I have to listen to what like God or whoever you believe in, like what is going on in the world? What is going on in my life right now? I have to listen. But for me, God's like, you're doing life in a way that doesn't serve you. And so I'm gonna have you deal with some suffering. I'm gonna have you deal with like a lot of pain, some heartache, And I'm like, oh, and that's the best lesson, And it's not easy. There's a lot of grief. There's a lot of like pain. Um, but just like a phoenix, and like that lotus flower, you got to go through that. And I remember when I um, got sick, I went to the hospital. I had like my kidney taken out because I had some complications with my kidney. Yoga was something that my kidney doctor, had said that's the only thing you can do because I was a very angry individual in my 20s and in my teens. So I loved hitting things. I loved like yelling. I loved like, lifting weights. But I did it for all the wrong reasons of like, looking good, being like looking strong, and just like I was angry. Like when I was running and kicking things, I was like, oh, that ex boyfriend, oh, or like, you know what I mean? And so, and like, it's not, it was a somewhat level of balance of trying to be healthy and like where my emotions, but also like knowing that this was not the path for me because I got really sick. And so
Mm.
my doctor was like, okay, you just had surgery. This is all you can do. 8 weeks later is yoga. And I'm like, my preconceived notion of yoga was like, okay, too easy. You're breathing, you're stretching, like spandex. Not for me. But let me tell you, when I bought that group on, I went to my first hot yoga class. Woo, what is going on in my body? What is going on in my hips? I can't breathe. Like, what is going on right now? It was the hardest thing I've ever done. That was in 2012. I remember my one of my teachers. He was the owner at Fusion Hot Yoga. He said to me once after a kick-ass class, kicking my brain left and right as well, that he was sitting down and I was just leaving the room. I was sweaty. It was red. I was just, wow, what happened in there? Who am I? Like rebirth. He was tying his shoes and he said to me, hey, Barasona, which he used to call me, hey, Barasona, when are you going to kick my ass in yoga class? And I'm like, no, 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 no. I am a student. I clean the studio. I come in. I practice. That is me. What is it? 12 years later? What is it? What year? No, 10 years. 10 years later, I'm surprised of like where I'm at, like again, time and time again, people have believed in me in my capabilities. Someone said, hey, grad school, you can teach middle school during the pandemic. I'm like, I lost a lot of clientele as a personal trainer and yoga teacher, right? Everything closed down. So I was like, yeah, I'll go to grad school with, you know, taking a loan out because I didn't have a lot of money, and I just got diagnosed with ADHD. So a lot of my life made a lot of sense. But the cool thing is, the more you know who you are in life, especially in the darkest and the hardest moments, that's when those are tools for your resources. You gotta know who you are. And so I was able to like know, okay, well, I know I deal with A, B, and C, anxiety, depression. I know I need to talk to people every day. So I made it my mission to like, okay, every day talk to two people. When I go to like downtown, if I go down to the grocery store, to the gym, I have to talk to somebody. Okay, I gotta laugh daily. Okay, I gotta like laugh daily. So I had to like come up with a routine that helped who I am in this world, be able to do things that I know I want to do, like go to grad school, which I never in my life thought I could do. And so here I am, like thinking back of like, man, you're asking me like, how did you become and be a teacher? Like, I had no idea I was going to be a teacher. Like, whoa, that's questions to me. Oh, that's what I do. I'm just like honestly sharing my life and my wisdom to who wants to listen. Um, yeah, and it's around health and wellness and how to live life to the it's the highest quality that you can, the highest standard that you can, with freedom, and love and connection, and less shame, less fear, less anxiety. Because I've been through a lot of that, and I hope my life can help others. Have more ease and have level of like I have the power to be able to get through this no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's so beautiful. But I mean, honestly, having taken one of your classes, like you're definitely doing it. Like the energy you bring, like I said, is infectious. Like you feel that. Like here's someone that actually wants to help you grow and heal. And I feel like energy always speaks volumes, And I think, like you said, the lotus flower needs to go through the mud. I realize, like, as much as like our journey in meditations like to recognize suffering so that we can sort of relieve ourselves from it, I also realize that by going through a journey where you do suffer, it gives you sort of like a toolkit to see yourself in other people's experiences and to have more empathy for others and have more love for others, because you recognize like we're all reflections of each other. Like we're all going through similar things. We all have that voice in our head that's telling us we're not good enough or you can't do this. And like I still have moments where I surprise myself at how good I am at something, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like at the beginning of this you thought there was no way in hell that you were going to get this done. You really had no clue. You were stressed out about it, but here you are. You did it. Like you achieved the very thing you said you couldn't do. And like I find that like that is so awesome that no matter what in life, you can constantly surprise yourself. You can
Mm,
constantly show yourself
yeah.
how strong you are. Like
Mm,
show yourself how powerful you are, even when that voice in your head tells you otherwise. The light within you knows how strong and capable you are. And when you have people in your community that resonate that and like can see where you're struggling and give you a helping hand because they've been through it, that that is for me the thing that transforms the world, like really and truly. And I'm curious because I know you mentioned that you were going to a retreat soon. Like, what is the tea on that? Like, I'm, like, kinda jealous a little bit, like, a whole retreat, like, I would love to go to a retreat one of these days, but I'm still, like, figuring it out, like, how do I even pick a good one that actually resonates with me, and it's not just a bunch of hippies doing drugs in Maui or something, like
I mean, definitely do your research. I think it's gosh, you said something that really like, I mean, I think that's what I love about my ADHD brain, with a little dabble of anxiety and depression. It's like I'm always like over analyzing and like checking in, like who am I speaking through right now? Like who am I who's talking? I'm not like, I don't have multiple, personalities because I don't. I went through like, a psychologist and a psychiatrist, so I know. And and I know my brain's just like thinking, my ADHD must go, okay, let's like all these stories. And I'm thinking, you know what? You said something really important that I want to touch on. And I want to answer
Hmm.
the question too, which I already forget what it was. But just being real. But it's just being in our class, being in our meditation class together. Let me tell you that I love doing things on my own. I'm actually like a closet introvert, but when I'm out, I feel the energy, you know what I mean? Like make at B1 yoga studio, that is a loving community, just like the other studio I work at, Fusion. And it's like a level of like being able to be vulnerable and safe in this space. I'm not like
Hmm.
that everywhere, but once I know I can be safe, I can let loose a bit, right? But in that room, when we do meditate, it's like the stories in our head. It's being able to like know, hey, that is a story that is not me, and I know that it's a fail safe that's trying to protect me from something that I don't want to come. You know what I mean? And that's the power of like meditation, which I never thought I could do. When I got diagnosed, that was about a couple years later. Fast forward to now, when Tang, our teacher and my friend, invited me, it was on a whim. I actually didn't plan on like I taught class, I was gonna leave, but something about the right time. There's a season you gotta be really like present to it
Hmm.
and slow down because sometimes my brain goes so fast that I'm ready in the next like room when I'm still like in the same room. You know what I mean? Like why am I even here? And so I've been moving more slow in this part of my life and realizing how meditation is a game changer and has changed my life. And it's really like for me similar to praying, being present to like the air I breathe. Like this for me is like, God has given me this life. I am breathing this air. I could die any moment. I don't even know when I'm going to, but I get to breathe right now. And being present to the simple mechanism of like my body knows how to breathe. I don't have, and I can control it too. But that my emotions and who I am is so connected to my breath. And I was at church day, which is interesting because not that I was at church, but that the visiting pastor, she was talking about how breath um, was so like breath is so powerful, and that if we were present to like how our breath defines who we are, because how we breathe, fast, slow, we get anxious, we get like scared, like it's our breath, right? If we slow down, we get more calm, don't we? Like how interconnected that is. Isn't that crazy? And so it's like, well, of course breathing is something we need to pay more attention to, and the world is coming along, right? Research is showing up and people are taking it like, oh, we have to breathe and be present to our breath. But for me, as someone who never knew I had ADHD but now I do, I have a level of like being present I've never ever had experience in my life ever before. And before, it was where I had to take drugs and be at that moment. And when I took these drugs, I'd be jealous of people. Like, is this how it feels like to be present and not hear all the voices and like all the to dos and all the lists and all the things in my head all the time? It's like a storm. It's very chaotic. And I'm like, I would be very jealous. Fast forward to now, I'm like, there's a level of peace, there's a level of content, and like I could cry because it's something I've always wanted, and it was on a natural way of being as a human is breathing, being present to it. that I look forward to sitting, which if you met me 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, like, no, I cannot. I was that yogi in yoga school who fell off my cushion, by the way, in front of the teacher, by the way, who was a world renowned teacher, by the way. And I was like, never again, right? But that's where that in that moment, that's what happens where I was cut off by my own experience of even ever stepping into an ashram or stepping into a meditation practice. So for me, going to this, it's like a 7 day retreat is first of all, it's a prerequisite. I have to do it. But I also want to do it. And I'm actually buying a ticket today. And because so last year during my birthday, something happened where I was praying and I was practicing discerning, making decisions in my life. Because if for those who deal with ADHD, making a decision is very overwhelming. Like there you are on your day off, trying to do something on your to-do list. An hour goes by, you don't have even made a decision. You know what I mean? And so I decided to practice using meditation as a tool to um, encourage myself to know how to make the right decision. And I had taught kids in middle school how to make decisions when I didn't know how to make the best decision. So I had to, I was like, this is something I need to slow down and like actually look and hone in. So I was looking online and I just was looking because I love going to teacher training. I love like learning and achieving and like, you know what I mean? And fine tuning my craft. And I'm always all about the spiritual journey. And I love Vipassana, which is insightful yoga, which is what we've been practicing. And I came upon this teacher training with two respectful teachers, Jack Cornfield, one of them, and another one I can't remember right now. My brain is like, don't remember, it's okay, but you can look her up. And in this training, and she's a psychologist, so she has a lot of research in her background. Also, she's a Vipassana teacher as well. They both wrote books. They have their own YouTube. I'll have to let you know. I'll send you a link. But and it's because they have free material on their own channels, but it's like they paired together and create this program called the Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Program. Or was it the Meditation Mindfulness? But it was Teacher Program. And I just was called to like sign up at 2 o'clock in the morning because I'm a night owl. All right. I could be a morning person if I want to, but I signed up and it's a 2 year program because Melissa's like, I want to do like the hardest program with the highest reviews, gold stars. And it was like beyond my budget and it didn't make sense for me to apply. But I was like, oh, God is saying on my heart, Holy Spirit is saying, you got to apply right now. Oh, there's a scholarship. Do it right now. My old Melissa was like, do it tomorrow. Like, you're tired. Go to bed. And that for me is part of like the discernment and part of like, oh, you got to listen because I know myself. If I wait, I'm going to forget. So I did it. The next day, I got the scholarship and I got in. And that was like months ago. But now as it comes to like the stomach, oh, I gotta do that. So I have about a 6-7 day retreat. It's going to be silent meditation, Vipassana in California, and I'm actually scared, excited, and just all these emotions. Like you know how we experience different emotions, all interlayered. Yeah, because I'm going to be, away from civilization, no phone. I can't connect with human beings. Even talking to my teacher who's leading, I have to look down, and so it's going to be a lot of introspect work and it
Mm.
should be very fascinating. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious to hear how it goes when you come back from your journey. For sure, for sure.
well, I got to
But
talk again.
yeah, yeah, I feel it. But I just want to say thank you so much, Melissa, for coming on the podcast and sharing your time and your story and your energy with me because I really enjoyed getting to know you for the past few years that we've been a part of this group. And, I really love it when you share because it like empowers me to share too. And I know like we've held each other accountable and sharing in the group and just being a part of your spiritual journey and to see how you grow and we both continue to just like learn more about who we are and the energy that you know is common to all of us and being able to see how we can sort of expand this love of self and love of others and have more empathy for others and more empathy for ourselves really and truly. It's such a beautiful beautiful journey to get to share with you, so thank you so so much for being on the podcast and sharing all that you have today with us because it means the world to me, and I just look forward to seeing how this journey continues to unfold and what more we get to discover about who we are and this crazy thing called life, you know?
Well, I thank you for all the time, the invitation, just to share my story and having me present to my story again. Thank you. Yeah, I can't wait to see what life has in front of us, in it together, right? Let's go.